Alright, today in this video we're going to be breaking down a 15 Gambit. Now this was done at the very start of week 2, so we had just acquired our second Spark, so some of us were able to craft. We also had access to our Great Vault, which most of us took Mythic Loot. I unfortunately had access to just a Mythic Loot Trinket that I'm not even using, so my power gain from the first week to the second week didn't really jump up that much at this point. This is the very first key that we ran during the week just as like a warm-up, as a precursor to our hard mode run that we did right after this, but I want to walk through everything that we did right, wrong, and everything in between and talk about some of our strategies. Now, one thing I do want to note is that talent build / our route and everything should be located down below via the Raider.io permalink. But let's get into it. So starting off the run, we are going to be in the Gambit on this kind of like little rock ledge thing, and most groups go down to the left because you're going to get all your count there, but instead, because we have access to that Shroud of Concealment from our rogue, we're going to actually be pulling a lot less Fishmancers, so we don't have to deal with fish sticks, and instead opting to pull more like Fishmancers, as well as the Shell Crushers and Goliaths, because the Goliaths are actually really efficient count, and ever since their Tidal Stomp cast doesn't stack and increase damage with every subsequent cast, they are kind of, I don't want to say free, but like they're really efficient in terms of count, and they're really not that dangerous as long as everyone knows exactly how they operate, which is basically dodging the boulder throw and making sure you use a defensive whenever the group damage happens. So the one big thing that we're looking out for, though, is we're going to be utilizing things like Ring of Peace and Death Grip to kind of group things back to us. Luckily, we also have the Warrior running Piercing Howl, so when mobs do start sprinting away, that we're able to apply a 70% slow to them, keeping them relatively grouped up. Now, we want to focus on the Shell Crusher. Now, one thing to note, I just paralysed him there while he was fleeing away. Now, if you CC them, they're actually going to change direction that they're running. So just something to keep in mind. You can even cast things like, Polymorph or any kind of stun, or like, Stormbolt, Nox, really anything. But in this case, I have access to paralysis. Now, one other thing that you could run in here is Clash. Now, Clash, unfortunately, is kind of bad nowadays. The root breaks on damage, so it's really difficult to actually like utilize it as a true 4-second root. But once that first pull goes down, we're going to be now going into this kind of like deep southern corner where there's a handful of Fishmancers. Unfortunately, 2 of them are going to go off on our Death Knight, who forgets, or I guess doesn't forget, but doesn't notice and doesn't AMS. They had all their defensives up there. We could have stopped them. We had a couple of kicks as well. First key jitters of the week. So, but this pack is going to go down pretty quickly as well. A lot of these little shore runners aren't elites, so they die very, very quickly. And then we're able to focus on kind of the meat of the pull, which is basically all the Fishmancers and Shell Crushers. Now, tanks. Shell Crusher do a Shell Cracker ability, which is just basically a mini tank buster. Now, Brewmasters, it's all physical damage, so we're going to stagger the majority of the damage, so you don't have to be too scared of it. But some other tanks, like maybe Bloodeth Knight, do have to be aware of that tank buster and be ready with a nice Death Strike or some type of like soft mitigation like Rune Tap. Now, we are kind of staying on these any of the fishes that are running, or the Murlocs, why did I call them fishes? Any of the Murlocs that are running towards a different Murloc pack that we don't want in our route, we want to try to stop. So that's why we're kind of chasing down and monitoring the ones that are running towards other Murlocs. The ones that are running off towards like where we previously were, or the shoreline, for example, we're not really going to care too much about. Here is our second Goliath of the dungeon. This is going to be the primary focus in the pull, but just because he does have more health. So things like the Death Knight, who can play a little bit more funnel with that Deathbringer specialization, have the access to funnel into him using all these shore runners, Fishmancers, and Shell Crackers. There we go. That's not even what they're called, are they? Shell Crusher. There we go. So this pull, fairly tame. Now, the one thing that we do have in this pull is a Scalebinder. Scalebinders spawn those really nasty, invigorating fish stick totems. And when they get dropped, luckily they're no longer counted as totems, so they are affected by most AoE spells. I do know for a fact that Flurry Strikes doesn't hit them for some reason, so don't depend on Flurry Strikes to help kill them off. I don't know if that's a bug or intended based on the way that Flurry Strikes is just coded, but basically you're going to focus those down when you can. Even though they are getting cleaved down now by AoE, or most AoE I should say, focusing them is really a really good idea, because if that Invigorate cast gets off, the mobs are going to start healing, and that's no bueno. The last thing in this Murloc area that I do want to talk about are the Shell Crackers. Cry of the Murgalurgalurg, whatever it is. When that goes off, they will only cast it when they are sub 50% health. So you don't need to worry about interrupting it when they're high health, but that is a pretty difficult in range to deal with. It'll affect all nearby Murlocs, and it'll give them a attack speed increase. I don't know if it's also a damage modifier, but that could spell lethality for a tank who is not paying attention or doesn't have defenses available. I can't imagine it's going to be an issue until very, very, very high keys, but if you can stop it, great. Now, one thing we did in this pull is because we didn't want to do it with double Scalebinder, we left one CC'd out. Now, in hindsight, we probably just pull them together and just blow up the fish sticks, especially when we have CDs rolling like Breath of Cindergrosa, for example. But then we want to focus on whatever Scalebinder is lower. If you're able to kill the Scalebinder that spawned the fish stick before the fish stick actually like ticks, it'll actually just despawn and disappear, and then you don't have to kill it. So always focus the Scalebinders, because they are probably the most problematic mobs, and they can cause the pull to take a very, very long time. Once this pull goes down, we're going to have basically one more pack to deal with, and then we're going to be doing a Shroud Skip, which I'll talk about here in a second. So this is probably one of the most dangerous packs. And when I say dangerous, I mean it's more or less like most annoying, because there are double Scalebinders in this pull specifically, which means that we're going to have two fish sticks spawning pretty much back to back. Now, luckily, cooldowns, quick target swaps, Touch of Death being applied as well, which is a potential for the Brewmaster Monk, can delete these and remedy that kind of obstacle. Now, we have one last Coast Walker Goliath coming in. Unfortunately, his start patrol was really, really bad, so he took a while to get in. Ideally, we would have pulled him in from the start so we can get early damage on him. So what's going to end up happening, which is unfortunate, is that we're really just going to have to end up single targeting this man down. Here we go. Once more, the Shell Crusher is trying to patrol away. I am pinging to not let him go past that spot, because we don't want him to pull any more trash that we don't plan on pulling. But now with just the Goliath left, we are basically doing a full single target blast. We need this guy to die before we can do any Shroud. So I'm going to skip forward just a little bit. Again, he has some group damage, and that's pretty much it. Tidal Stomp comes out, and that'll be where it's good to use things like defensive. So we employed things like Spell Reflect to have a 20% DR, and Feint to have a 20 or 30% DR, whatever it ends up being. Anyways, now we are mounting. I have the X marker down to know when we should start shrouding. We shroud through, and then once we get into this area, we are going to drop a Wind Rush when we're in between these two packs of Guardians. That Wind Rush will allow anyone who gets dismounted to be able to make it into this room without pulling. Now, the only unfortunate part about doing this is that we will have to deal with RP. It is common for a lot of groups, especially range compositions, to pull all of those Guardians onto boss. They're fairly easy count. They don't change the fight much unless you're a tank or a melee DPS. But if you have a full range comp with a range healer, the fight is basically the same, and you can get 10% on boss, which is super, super easy. Maybe in a future video, if I ever end up playing with some more range DPS, I will do a video covering how to do that. But for the time being, we're probably going to be skipping these Guardians for a long time, because our route in here is fairly fast for like Gambit, I would say, even for 15 this early on in the season. And yeah, so we'll play it by ear. Now, we're going to land a paralysis on one of these mobs early. This allows us to really only have to worry about one bolt going off, and then we can just simply CC the empowered defense to make sure we're getting full boss damage. During this channel, the boss is taking 50% reduced damage. You can't just let them channel, which means you have to deal with less casts, but we end up just doing that. And then once you get into the intermission, the ads don't do anything outside of try to like protect the players from putting these runes in. But that's not a bad thing, because the room, they really nerfed the fight. It used to start growing out from the center like pretty quickly, and we're on a very tight time crunch. Now you have about 30-35 seconds before the bosses will start filling up the room with this like golden Titan magic on the floor. In terms of putting the runes in, we generally will have the tank channel the council, or console, however you want to say it. And everyone can see what the things are, but I'm also reading them out for everyone in Discord so they know, so they don't actually have to look. So I read it in the order that they spawn, starting in top right, bottom left, top left. So in like a reverse U shape, also known as counterclockwise, but it makes a shape of a U when it spawns, so that's why I say that. Anyways, we're going to be pulling in these ads, blowing them up. We don't have Lust, but we do have Breath of Cindergrosa that will be available here soon. I don't know why we're sitting on it. I would imagine it's for the Pillar of Frost window. But yeah, just basically sending CDs on CD, killing off the ads, focusing them. And if you can get a CC on the second ad set, that's always good. Now, the way that this boss fight works is that the first kind of intermission, or the first phase 1, will only have one ad set. And then every set after that, because his energy actually depletes all the way back down to 0, or is that 100? I don't remember. I think it starts at 0. Basically, you have 2 ad sets then per before each intermission. So then you want to basically blow up one, then you can CC out one on the second set. And then now my group is going to go off and kill it after the fact. So here we are. They're going to focus that one. That's paralysis. I'm going to click the center council, and channel. So I'm reading out red, yellow, blue, purple. And so they all know where to go. And we're going to then finish off this ad. Now, unfortunately, you might have just saw that our DK was waddling over to put in a rune. DKs should not do runes on this fight, in my opinion. I don't mind as a tank clicking one and then going to a rune and slotting it. And DPS can just focus on killing off those ads. So sub 35% means that we're going to be able to essentially tunnel. We might have one ad set coming in, but we're just going to be really aggressive about killing them quickly. I believe I paralysis one out if I remember correctly. Also, by the way, during the stream, thank you for all the follows and the subscribers. It means the world to me that I'm able to play the game, and obviously with your guys' support, I'm able to pay for my coffee, which is good. Gotta have that coffee. So not much left. The Purifying Burst is a bit of group damage. Your healer just wants to be ready for that. If you're a DPS player who's getting targeted as well, pop a minor defensive. There isn't a lot of other damage on the fight, so as long as you can live through that, you should be good. And then big shout out to Mike for the 2 gifted subs as well. All right, so when we finish this, we are going to be going to the next area. Now, I have memorized the exact spawn points of the portal, so I put down the world markers for my group to stand on, and that means we're going to instantly teleport as soon as he puts the portal up without having to walk through it. This is a 0.2 second time save, which is the best type of time save, because we're going to definitely time the key because of it. All right, next pull is going to be pretty lethal for most tanks, actually. These deckhands can be very, very powerful and very dangerous. They do a cast called Super Seasoning, Super Seon, and it's basically an enrage. So if you have Soothes in your group, so Druids, Rogues, Hunters, and Monks can remove this buff as well as Evokers. I forgot about them. But when they get this cast off, it's in your best interest to probably kite unless you have some major defensives rolling. For me, I have Dampen Harm. I also had Weapons of Order, and I'm also going to pop my Invoke the Black Ox, which is going to allow me to stagger off, or kind of push off some of that stagger damage onto the cow, and then I'm able to heal him through Purifying. As you can see, I'm getting slapped. This is through stagger, by the way. I have 82% stagger right now, so this damage is kind of insane. So as you can see, and quite quite evident, I do need to kite every once in a while. So I roll backwards up the hill. Don't feel like you need to be in the pole if you have established threat. If you're playing with a rogue like I am and have infinite tricks, there's no reason for you to have to stay in if there is any danger of dying. Those are probably the hardest hitting mobs in any of the dungeon pool, so really respecting these deckhands is pretty important. Now in this area, you can be a little bit more aggressive. First off, you can start roleplay a little bit earlier. There is a trigger on the hill that we were just up on. If you have a ranged DPS or even the tank while they're kiting, break through that barrier. It'll start the RP earlier, meaning that all the trash packs will be in place. Now, we didn't do that because these trash pulls are pretty scary, and we're not going to be doubling them up, especially because I had to use a lot of my defensives on the previous pull. So once the one of the Tide Sages go down, we are going to eventually chain. We do have access to Breath in about 20 seconds paired with that Pillar of Frost, and we have something like Avatar also coming up. The big thing here is kicking Brackish Bolt. A lot of the group damage you're going to be taking during this is actually from the officers. They have an instant cast called Throw Sword, or Sword Toss, or whatever it's called, and it just cleaves players and does some physical damage. So where you're seeing that group damage, that's where that's coming from. So try not to pull too many officers, because if they all do that ability at the same time, you're probably just going to wipe, especially if it overlaps with a bolt. We also never really want more than 2 Tide Sages at the same time. They do this Brackish Bolt, they kind of spam it more or less, and so you want to interrupt as much as you possibly can. And then this being our last trash pack, we're going to start kind of banking CDs a little bit here. We have about 45 seconds for Avatar and about a minute for Breath. So we are kind of just like sitting back, hanging out, and killing off these mobs. So I'm going to fast forward just a little bit here. Unfortunately, we did have a death on our DK. You can see here he was targeted by 1 Brackish Bolt, and it was hit, and then a second Brackish Bolt. He had access to Icebound Fortitude, and right before that, he was hit with Sword Toss twice in a row, and he went down. Now, Icebound Fortitude could have stopped that. Death Gripping some of the bolts could have stopped that. So just kind of some just notes here. Going into Time Captain Hooktail, this is how we do this fight. We drag the boss to the corner to start. Unlike hard mode, you only have to hit the ads once, so keeping the boss as far away as possible gives you the widest arc at the end, so you're able to hit all the ads with ease, and your group, as you can probably notice, is all stacked behind the boss, so those fixates are always funneling in. If you're off on the side, the ads might walk out of the breath last second, which can be very problematic, because if you're not focusing them down by killing them with like just your raw like DPS, then this is the best way to remove them. But if you don't kill them with the breath and they get too close, they're going to already have a very high attack speed. And that's obviously very problematic. So what we're doing here is I'm trying to get the boss now far, so we have a wide arc again up against while being up against the cliffside. Now, I'm always going to be turning my camera around every set these ads come out because I always have access to things like Ring of Peace, Leg Sweep, Paralysis, and you could run Clash in here as well. Clash is actually like pretty good on this fight because the ads shouldn't be getting hit, so the root actually won't break. So Clash is just an idea to run in here. I've actually done a Gambit since, and I ran Clash, and it wasn't terrible. It's more of a last resort kind of thing, never a I'm going to use Clash first. Like, you're always going to use it like, oh shit, this thing just happened and I want to like make sure it's all good, all kosher. So that was the third ad wave. Now what we're going to do is we're going to try to play in the middle of the room up near the boat for the non-ad set breath, which is this one here. And then once this goes off, we want to beeline it back to the corner that we started in because the fire is going to start disappearing soon. So unfortunately, the boss goes into kind of a spell queue, and one of the bombardment shot targeted me. So this one is really awkward. The boss didn't move fast enough. So I'm going to have to like turn around and aim at some of these ads. We're going to CC the others. I'm going to just hit 2 of them. We got a nice blind. Unfortunately, he death gripped the mob in. It was late. Like, I understand he was trying to grip it into the breath, but it's just better to leave it out so it doesn't get cleaved down. So now we're in this awkward spot where he's fixating. So we're going to kidney him right before the breath goes off. Very good play by CL there. And now we should be good for the rest of the ad set. So that one is probably the trickiest one to do. It's better that you just CC 2 of the ads and hit 2 of them with breath on that set in particular. But we recovered quite nicely. So moving the boss down, we're probably going to have one more breath to kill ads here in a second. My group is trying to play cliffside, so they're nice and safe. I'm going to aim breath away from them. I'm not going to try to strafe around too much so they're not having to react. It's a little bit easier to do this fight as melee ever since they removed the boss's Hooktail ability, which caused any player behind the dragon to take a ton of like bleed damage, basically. And then here's the last ad set of the fight. We're going to get it down nice and easy. Unfortunately, I think I missed one, and that's kind of the reason you want everyone behind the boss and not on the side like most of my group was, but we knew the boss was sub 6%, so we were good. All right, so heading up, I'm going to put down some markers for my group to stand. Again, that 0.2 second time save is massive, and this is going to get us into the final area of the dungeon with essentially like 12 minutes to go. A little more than 12 minutes, so we're looking really, really, really good. Now, we're going to try to do this in one fairly large chain pull, or you can kind of break it up into like 3 pulls if you want to. We're going to grab this left Adorned Starseer and drag him over to this pack here with the Ritualist. We're going to get a range kick on him to move him back. We're going to dodge the Drifting Star, and then priority is always the Wandering Pulsar here. It's going to spawn near a player, so ideally everyone can be near melee. It was spawned on the backside of our Shaman, who was out about 10 yards. Not a big deal. We're going to run to it. And then the only other thing you're looking out for in this pack is obviously the Hyperlight Bolts need to be kicked, but the Unstable Rift from the Ritualists are lethal. If it goes off, especially at this key level, it's going to one-shot your entire group outside of maybe your tank who gets lucky. So yeah, make sure you're having a DPS to watch that. For us, CL, our rogue, is assigned to watching that rift in this pull. Pulsar spawns, we're going to swap to it, and we're on a good pace. So the pacing you want for these Starseers is you don't want them to spawn a Pulsar at the very, very end before they die, because the Pulsar actually does stay active. Now, I'm going to ring this patrol a little bit closer to me, so we're easily able to get some kicks, get them grouped up, and eventually we're going to chain in the Starseer. Now, this pack can be deceptively chill, but it's very dangerous. These accomplices do a ton of magic damage to the tank, which doesn't have a cast and is kind of hard to track. I think it's actually like a buff that they get that can be purged. I might be wrong about that, so correct me if I'm wrong. But basically, the accomplices do like a really nasty like tank buster, and I think it's contingent on them having a buff, but I actually don't know because I sometimes get them mixed up with the Street Trash, because the Street Trash has the Hard Light Batons, which is a purgeable debuff that does a lot of damage to the tank. So I'm going to commit things like Invoke the Black Ox, things like Dampen Harm, and I'm always sitting kind of with Fortifying Brew in my back pocket. I don't use it as much as I used to, especially with our old tier set going away, which gave us the free procs, as well as us playing Iron Shell Brew a little bit more often, which was the 30% DR versus the 20. So I tend not to use Fortifying Brew as much, but I will use it in a pinch. So Unstable Rift needs to get kicked. That's very good. Starseer is going to go down here shortly. Ideally, we're going to beat the next Pulsar. I believe we do. Nope, it goes off at the last second, so we do need to swap to this and kill it quickly, while also making sure we're locking on Hyperlight Bolts, because an overlap there, again, going on our Death Knight, can be disastrous. Luckily, he did live. Death Knights are very tanky without defensives, and then with defensives, they're basically immortal. And lastly, we're going to pull the last Starseer on just to get some early cleave. The rest of the mob should go down before he even does the next Pulsar, so we're kind of safe. Now, another strategy that some groups do is they actually just pull the 2 Starseers together by themselves and do 2-target cleave. This is a little bit better for healer cooldowns because you can assign you can just use a cooldown for a double set of Pulsars, where when you're doing one at a time, you still kind of want to use a cooldown, but it's not dangerous enough to really be worth it. So it's really kind of depending on your healer and or your group's comfortability. And this is going to put us exactly at 100% count. We are at 96.53. This is giving us 3.47. Some quick math is 100p. Last Pulsar is going to be here. Now, unfortunately, no one really swapped to it. Our Warrior was still hitting. Our DK was still hitting. I think our Rogue was the only one who swapped to it. Clearly, they're dangerous, so make sure you're killing them. Our group had to commit some defensives there. Well, AMS, basically, but it was after the damage. All good. And then we're going into Solea, and we have... what is that? 8.5 minutes. So we have plenty of time to do this fight. The harder part of the fight is phase 2, but you do want good pacing in phase 1 because you want to phase the boss at an appropriate time. And I'll kind of point it out when we get there. So starting off the fight, the assassins are going to spawn. There is a strategy to pull the boss over to the side of the arena to make sure the ads are spawning stacked up. I personally, and this doesn't mean I'm right, I think it's a dumb strat because oftentimes the collapsing star will still spawn very far and the ads still will teleport out. So you're still gonna have to run out and kick. And then if your tank is soaking or your healer is soaking or a range DPS and then they have to run out of range, I just like to tank the boss in the middle of the arena and call it a day. It makes, I think, all the mechanics just easier to deal with. Also, there's no rush on killing the ads, so having them stacked personally isn't much of a save at all. So here we are, the second set of assassins. Now, ideally, we don't get a third set. I can't remember if we do or not. I'm using paralysis often as a range way to kick. With enough bleeds and dots on the mobs, the paralysis should break and they will come back in from things like flame shock, as well as, I think, gushing wounds and maybe poison. I don't remember if poison actually exists, but yeah. So here's our collapsing star at 50%. Now the worst thing that can happen is you get a collapsing star spawn as you're phasing, because the intermission is, you're going to take a lot of damage. So you want to be able to remove this collapsing star before the intermission. Now we did get our third set of ads, not a big deal. We're just going to cleave them down. It's also going to give us something to hit once we go into the intermission here. So there we are. Boss is kind of dragged to the center, 40%. He's going to go into his intermission. He's going to take 99% reduced damage here in a couple seconds. And we're just going to be hitting the ads and cleaving them down. A big Reaping Scythe finishes them off. And here we are. I'm just getting ready. There's nothing really for me to do here outside of maybe keep Shuffle up. But with the 99% reduced, I don't want to send Achievers. I don't want to send Weapons of Order until the phase. That just came up. So we're going to be running over to the right-hand side or left-hand side. I guess it depends on how you're oriented. But we're going to go to the north side of the arena. With everyone standing where I am, you can pretty easily see the stars. There's also a kind of a safe spot where I'm standing as well. I don't have a marker down, but basically by standing still like this, I should never really have to move left or right based on the way that the stars spawn. I could have probably just stayed still. I did kind of strafe here and there, but there's a safe spot, and it's in between these swirl patterns on the ground, a little bit forward. I popped a Fuse Magic here to just eat the soak, or not the soak, but the circle. The Nova doesn't do a ton of damage, and especially because I'm not soaking the collapsing star, there's no reason for me to use a defensive anywhere else, so I'm going to use it to maintain a little bit of better uptime on the boss. Now in phase 2, what we end up doing is we actually do a 3-1 soak, and what I mean by that is our shaman is going to soak 3 times, and then the last one is going to expire. And when it expires, it does its damage. Generally speaking, it won't overlap with any major mechanics, so you can safely let it expire and not have to worry about it. Here we go. We all have kind of pseudo-assigned positions in the room to know where we're going to go to break these stars. Not a big deal. All right, now we're walking back to our kind of same position here. Dampen Harm gets committed, and we're just doing a little bit of Singy T. Cooldowns were just popped by our DK. Our Warrior will have CDs on Avatar in a little bit here. I believe we lust. Or maybe we lost at the very end. I don't remember when we lost, actually. So there, our shaman actually got a soak early because we don't want to be soaking during these fragmentations. The fragmentations actually can get a little scary, as you can see that our shaman just went down there. We're going to dodge, and because he went down, I'm going to choose to go and soak so he can kind of get his bearings, get some hots rolling again, making sure that we're all like kind of ready. He's going to run out again, soak once more, and then the last one's going to expire in a few seconds here. Now, luckily, we were able to get that done. You have 30 seconds to do the full soak. So soaking one early is always the play, and then after that, you can, you know, it's like you can even soak like once every like 8 seconds. It's not tight at all. One last big spread, and I believe at the end of the fight here, we're going to Lust coming out of this and send the boss home. Dragging back to the corner. Weapons of Order is now fading. Lust gets popped. Unfortunately, we have no CDs. We'll have Breath in about 30 because he's going to pair with Pillar. And then we have Avatar in 30. So probably not an ideal Lust at all, but we send it just to send it. Yeah, and if you know you're going to kill in the next 30 seconds, there's no reason for you to soak. I think we're going to end up soaking anyways. Diffuse Magic once again gets committed here, so I can just stand in the circle, get some better uptime. And yeah, this is it. And boss is gonna go down here. So yeah, big GG's. We had 3 minutes left on this 15 Gambit. Not too bad of a run. Gambit's probably one of the easier dungeons. The regular route is just like run left down the shore of the Murloc area and then hold W. But this is a pretty good route if you have access to a rogue or you feel like you want to invis to the boss. But anyways, I hope you guys learned something. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I will catch you all in the next one. Peace.